Hey there, micro friends. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Micro. As always, I'm so happy that you're here with me. And if this is the first time you're listening to Let's Talk Micro, well, thank you for choosing it as one of your podcasts. Okay, I'll be brief and tell you a little bit about today's episode. In today's episode, I am joined by two fellow medical lab scientists, which are Stephanie Whitehead and Aaron Odegard. They are both very active, in the lab circles. You see them in conferences, they're huge for advocacy. And they also, along with Melody Boudreau Nelson, another medical lab scientist, all three of them are podcasters. They host the podcast called SuperStat, where they talk about laboratory medicine, workforce development, and more. So in this episode, I am joined by Aaron and Stephanie, and they talk about their podcast and they also talk about their upcoming book, which is Little Lab Learners, ABCs of Laboratory Medicine. And this is for young readers, to start get them, to read about the lab and learn more about it, which is a great initiative. So this is a great episode. I enjoyed my conversation with Aaron and Stephanie. So let's go ahead and listen to it. Hey, micro friends, and this time, I want to say lab friends. As I am a huge micro nerd and but I'm also a medical lab scientist. So from time to time, I kind of step out and talk lab instead of talking just micro. And today's episode is about that. We're talking lab. So I have two guests here with me that not only, they're fellow medical lab scientists, they're very involved outside of the lab. They have done many things, and they are also fellow podcasters. So with me today, I have Stephanie Whitehead and Aaron Odegard. Stephanie, Aaron, welcome to Let's Talk Micro.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I'm very excited to be on.
Right? Yeah, I know. Yeah, about time that that you're here. Yeah.
I know. I was gonna say.
I think at some point in time you have to come back and talk micro. It'll be good. We always see each other like in conferences and things, and we have that passion for microbiology. So yeah, it hasn't happened yet, but it has to.
At the right
And
time. Eventually made it.
yeah. And if you remember, I don't know, maybe if you're a long-time listener, I was a guest, with Stephanie. She was part of a podcast before, Elaborate Topics,
Elaborate topics. Yeah.
where she had me on as a guest on the early days of Let's Talk Micro. So thank you for that opportunity. It's good to see you again and talk to you.
Yeah. Just like we never left.
Yeah. So for the listeners, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners that they know both of you in one way or another, but for everyone, let's go ahead and start with like a quick introduction, about what can you tell the audience about yourself, maybe a little bit about your background and the kind of work you do in laboratory medicine.
Well, hello. Let's talk micro audience listeners. My name is Stephanie Whitehead, and I'm a laboratory executive and a laboratory leader. I've been in the laboratory for almost 20 years, so I'm not going to tell you my age, but you can do that math. I love laboratory medicine. My background spans from hospital administration to operations and leadership, workforce development, team building and team engagement, onboarding. But I've really just spent my career working on that intersection between building a team and growing a really productive operations. Outside of the work that I do from 9 to 5 in the laboratory, super involved mom, but also very much involved with my business partner and dear friend, Aaron Odegard. We have a business called Delta Check LLC. And so, like I said, beyond those daily operations, work with Aaron and my other business partner, Melody, to be passionate about advocacy and leadership development and how we can grow the presence of laboratory in the healthcare economic space.
I am Aaron Odegard. I've been in microbiology. I started out my career at U of Health and spent probably about 18 years on between the bench and being a technical specialist for a little bit. So micro's been kind of my passion for a long time. And then for microbiology, I ended up going into quality in laboratory kind of administration. But for a long time, I've been teaching microbiology to different students at Santa Fe College and Hillsborough College recently, and University of North Florida when they had their programs. So outside of the lab, I'm actually got into curling, so it's been a very fun sport. I never thought I'd ever do that. And I do spend a lot of time with my one of my best friends over there, Stephanie, and Melody. So we do a lot of advocacy work throughout the state and throughout the country, and I'm just excited to be here.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you for being here, and yeah, no, both of you stay very very busy, and sometimes I think I'm very busy, and definitely Aaron, and you're the one that I have more contact with because I see you at conferences and things, but you definitely do a lot, and I see you, you're working, and then sometimes you're teaching multiple programs, so I know you definitely like to stay busy.
I usually see you running back and forth quite a bit,
Yeah.
which is nice. It's a good catch up.
Yeah. All right. So for the listeners, we're gonna dive a little more into your podcast and little learners. But before that, I just want to spend a little bit of time um talking about your careers a little bit, and it's always interesting finding what drew people to the lab. So that'll be a good place to start. Thinking back to your own path in the lab world, what initially drew you to laboratory medicine?
I'll go first. So initially in undergrad, I was a music major, then a Spanish major, then environmental biology, and then I finally took a microbiology class. And the professor was on the board for one of the MLS programs up in Jacksonville, so he was taking a field trip, and I went up there and started to see the laboratory, and they were showing me the different biochemicals and like everything on like a little microtiter plate. And she's like, "Oh, we just set this up real quick." And we had previously the week just set up all sorts of traditional phenotypic biochemicals, all those slants they make you set up. And I was like, I can't believe it's all in one panel. But she kept showing me the lab, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. So it was just something that just drew me in, and I realized I could take those lab skills and actually impact patients. So that got me to the bench, and then made my way further into the lab, and then got to see how we impact the patients, especially where I am now. I can be cranky about something, and then I see a little kid being walked in with their mom, and I'm like, okay, that's why I'm there. That's why I did that CSF gram stain, or while I'm working. So it's kind of what drew me in, and it just kind of feels like home. Um, and then volunteering has opened all sorts of doors for speaking and laboratory safety. I never thought I'd be doing laboratory safety, and I actually really do love it. So Dan Spongy, if you're listening, Dan the safety man, I love some safety.
I'll go next. What really drew me in, actually, my brother had a paper that he had to do when he was in high school, and he did it on laboratory science, and he practiced his public speaking on me, and so after hearing his speech, I kinda always was curious about the laboratory medicine career. I've always naturally been a problem solver, and I've always loved science, and so it kinda naturally blended the 2 for me, but always I kind of felt like even as a young age, I was always felt like I had those leadership skills, like, when we had to do a group project, I was always the one like, "Okay, guys, what are we gonna do, and who's gonna do what?" You know? And so I think what I'm doing now kind of blends all of those things together.
Yeah, as an introvert that I am, I loved having that leader in the group. Like you have a project, I'm like, just wait, I'll be quiet. Now, if someone is gonna step in and start dividing things, and then I'll just have to do is just work on my part. So it's great. It's something that I, of course, and I talked about this in the podcast. I have to work on it over the years, and doing this is stepping outside of my comfort line and getting out there and getting out of my shell. But okay, so and then over the course of your careers, what are some changes? The lab has changed a lot, and I talk about this. I have worked in all areas of the lab. Definitely a lot of changes in microbiology over the years. Even in 10 years. So, over the course of your careers, what are some changes in the lab and laboratory medicine that have stood out to you the most? And maybe I'll start with you, Aaron.
Oh yeah, so I lucked out. I came into the micro lab right when what Brett and Molly was kind of coming in, so there was still those more of those phenotypic biochemicals. We were still setting up the rapid ANAs and the rapid NAHs, and still had more of the biochemical tubes. And we were even still using the API 20Cs for yeast. So to see us go from more phenotypic biochemicals to bring in MALDI and do more direct specimen testing, and has been kind of it was kind of cool for me to see that. It's kind of like the fact that when I grew up, the internet just came to be, and now I'm one of those people that I'm like, I remember before the internet, and now I can be like, I remember when we did biochemicals for them. So just seeing how more automated we're becoming and how it's more like hematology and chemistry a little bit. And they look at us like we're crazy a little bit. We're like, oh my gosh, look, we have the answer. And they're like, we always have the answer. It's only, you know, it's automated.
I think for me, again, I love Aaron's answer. The pace, the complexity is dramatically different. I mean, I think there's always been this speed and technology and the advances in automation, and definitely way more point of care and things that you're able to do on your own. That direct to consumer testing has really grown since I've been in the field. But I really think what stood out is our visibility since the pandemic. So many people, for the first time during that pandemic age, kinda took notice to who we are, and some people have held on to that knowledge, and some people like myself and Aaron have really been able to leverage that and become, more visible in the healthcare field.
Yeah, so definitely true, and right, that's always a challenge that we have in the lab, that we talk about the awareness, and all the way from people finding out that this exists as a career, after someone has graduated and then they go back to school, and definitely a lot more visibility. And I see that, with the podcast, and I'm involved in social media a lot, and people are more active out there, and you see either people going to like high schools, or you see MLS pages out there, and definitely a lot. And when it comes to, yeah, with the automation and things, right, we make some great progress, which is always great for our patients. But we always have to be careful not to start losing those skills that we had prior to all the automation, because they're very important and we still see it. And, I've been recently in some times where Molotov goes down, and sometimes some cultures get delayed. And at the end of the day, 4 or 5 days have passed and no one has done a gram stain. They're like, okay, it's not growing. Maybe it's this, maybe it's this. Oh, and it's not growing on max. So I have this gram positive cocci, and then you just resub ring, and all of a sudden, wait a minute, did someone just do the most basic thing and just look at it on the microscope? Well, guess what? It's not a cocci, it's a gram negative diplococci. So here we go. So we have to keep that in mind as we do. It's always good to do those basic tests and maintain those skills, because they're very important, right? Many things can go wrong with automation and instruments, and we have to be the ones making those decisions and making sure that the information we put out there is the right one, right, for our patients. So, and I think, with what you do, and I identify myself a little bit too. Um, at some point in time, some lab professionals, we decide that either have an urge, or we want to do something a little beyond your traditional work on the bench. Let's say, you want to either contribute in some other way. So, and you obviously, right, had that, and so what made you want to have broader conversations about the lab profession?
So for me, it started with I taught at so the University of North Florida had an MLS program, and I worked really hard to get like the syllabus and everything together. We had a great semester, and then found out that it was closing due to funding. So partially, I was a little mad. I was like, I worked so hard on this, but I can't shut this program down. So I ended up starting like a Save the Lab Science kind of page, and got a graphic together and tried to get a campaign together. And that's when I kind of got more involved with ASCP, and they connected me. So it was just that I realized how important it was, and how it just kind of this was an amazing program, and it just wasn't being seen. And it just that just kind of kept going throughout my mind and about the profession. I was like, we've got to tell more people about it. So that was kind of the jumping off point that got me really involved in volunteering, and realizing I needed to my voice had power to it, and I could represent other people and advocate for other people.
Yeah, same. I think for me during the pandemic, and I started to realize, how siloed we all were or are, some of us still, in, you know, um, our response. Our lab was able to respond fairly well because we had many people like yourselves in our microbiology department with so much scientific and tribal knowledge. At the time, our microbiology manager had actually worked in the lab when HIV was a pandemic. So she was like, no stranger. She was like, yeah, this is normal. Like, we have a pandemic. There's an emerging disease. And, there was no fear at all from her. And so she was able to dive right in. But I think for me, what's interesting was I had spent a few years before the pandemic actually trying to make my way out of the laboratory. Like, I felt like there was no further impact that I could make. I was actually trying to pivot my career and look for something different. I'm glad I didn't because I wouldn't have met Aaron. Um, but I think after the pandemic, particularly seeing social media and how so many of our colleagues have just taken um, a stance that is just not as positive in social media spaces, and just really feeling like, you know what? We can't be behind the scenes. We can't say we're behind the scenes hero, then be mad when no one knows who we are, right? At some point, if you don't want to be behind the scenes, you got to come out from behind the scenes. And it's our responsibility one by one, myself, you, Lewis, you, Aaron, to tell the story to whoever will listen. So somebody else will know what our expertise is and what our contribution is in healthcare. And we're responsible for doing that ourselves. I mean, like nobody's coming to save us. We have to be the storytellers in our own situation. And so I decided to kind of see where I could fit in and started to get involved in professional organizations. One connection led to another, and then things kind of started to unfold from there. Should have definitely learned a few other life skills before, because at that time I didn't really have hold of the power of no. And so I was just saying yes to saying yes to a couple of things until you're finally like, man, I went from bored to booked and busy, like overnight, to tons of contacts and tons of text groups and tons of speaking engagements. But it's been fun. It's been a very fun journey.
So yeah, don't be afraid. Be brave. It's
Yeah, I always encourage people just get out there, and you feel you want to do something, more besides your traditional work, and there's definitely organizations and ways you can get involved. People are always so nice, and you see someone reach out to them. People always answer their emails, and they're an email away. Hey, how do you get involved in this? What can I do? And it's a great community out there, so don't be afraid, and take that step, and let your voice be heard. Yeah, definitely. So besides all the things that you have done, then you started a podcast, which, right, that's a lot of work too. I mean, it's and commitment, and I think this is in May. It's gonna be my 5th year already, so it takes a lot, and it's a whole different way. And so you started a podcast, which it's the SuperStat Podcast. So what led you to start that? And then maybe after that, you can also talk a little bit about what does it focus on. So maybe Aaron or Stephanie, whoever wants to jump first.
Sure. I mean, for me, and I'll speak for myself, I know Aaron had a podcast previous to this. I did too. Um, and elaborate topics. And I'm sure Aaron's previous podcast also is still available for listeners to hear that wonderful content. But Superstat Podcast was a natural transition for me as I was exiting, working with incredible people on a previous podcast venture. And then as that work and that vision for my own career journey and my own advocacy journey started to shift towards really more laboratory focused things. My previous podcast partners, we were very focused on laboratory, but much more on the individual in the laboratory space and the leadership and what makes you you and practical tips for you to excel and grow and beyond. And as my career journey started to shift to be more focused on how can we advocate and innovate beyond each test in lab result and turnaround time. Superstat was a natural progression. And so the podcast is weekly. It's on YouTube and all other podcast platforms, and it focuses on our paper that we wrote initially. So the beginning episodes are focused on lab cares. Our website also follows that same genre. So labcares.org is where you can find all of our content. But we really talk about things that are happening in the laboratory space, things that would be interesting. We give our take on, fraud or just new fads that you might see on Health Talk or TikTok or social media, and try to give a more scientific spin on it to help our listeners really understand some of the things that we're seeing culturally. What is the science behind all of that? Because people see things on social media and they assume that they are authentic and have been fact checked and all of those things. And we want to make sure that we're doing our part to engage people in that, still doing their own research, right? Doing what's best for you. And what if you feel like, um, do it yourself fecal transplant is for you, go for it. But, here's our take on the science behind that. And so that's really where the podcast has started. And we've had some episodes, like I said, on trends, episodes on leadership, episodes on, access to healthcare and our take on, testing deserts, a plethora of things. But, Aaron, what do you think?
Yeah, you covered it really well. No, it was we did start with the paper. We were trying to pull out more of a laboratory care model where the laboratory had a more visible, direct role, showing how much the laboratory can impact through access, through equity, through all sorts of testing deserts that you kind of talked about, um, and looking at the big role that we have. So then that initial paper led to, and we're always texting each other, and some of the conversations we were having, our leader at times, Melody Nelson, was like, "Okay, we're doing this. SuperStat is happening," and got us together. And we just, it's a great way for us to have fun, to talk about the laboratory, to just talk about the trends that are there and even up and coming things. So it's definitely, I can see it going for many more years. But even if it isn't going online, the three of us will keep going and talking about lab and having fun. So that's the big thing. And plus, we get to talk to. Oh, congratulations! Almost 5 years. That's amazing. A round of applause.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, it's great, and identify with so many things you said. It's one thing. You're taking this, especially doing it in this format, right? That, as I mentioned, it takes time, and if you're publishing weekly, I don't know whoever edits it, and they're busy, and that's a whole other thing. So, but yeah, it's the passion that you have, and I also say that even if I enjoyed, I did like the first 9 months or not having like a true idea of who was listening or what, and but I enjoyed so much. It's just like the one thing, what you said, Stephanie. People put a lot of information out there, but me, that process of me being responsible and putting the correct information, doing that research, that alone, I grew so much in knowledge, and as a microbiologist, so that alone is a win. And the same thing, if no one listened to it, but I'm so happy that people do, and I'll still record it, and I'll be putting my thing out there, and I'm happy to see that you do this, feel the same. It's just you enjoy doing it, and you will do it. Doesn't matter, and don't be discouraged. Also, I don't know these things when it comes to getting listeners out there, and maybe I don't know you in some ways or another have already kind of established in the lab community, so that helps. But it's a very long process, and sometimes you have to just keep at it, releasing episodes and putting great content out there, and and you start building that audience. So
And you can tell how passionate you are about micro and about the podcast too, and that passion definitely helps.
yes, yes, I do love it, and yeah, it's like as I said, everything from the process and just talking and networking, conferences, and seeing, learning. It's such a great, yeah, and it's has been an amazing journey. So um so throughout your conversations so far, is there like a theme or topic that have stood out to you?
Um, there's a couple. Only the gross ones stand out to me. And I say gross as graciously as I can because, again, whatever floats your boat, floats your boat. Some things you may like, I find difficult to understand. But we did one about, yeast in muffins. Just
Oh, I was wondering where
it's
you're
the
gonna
first thing
go.
it was the first thing that
This could
popped
have
in my
gone so
mind,
many
and
ways.
it was really just breaking down this reel that we had seen where this, female used her own bodily discharging yeast to bake into muffins for her spouse or her significant other to eat for breakfast. And so, we talked about just the different compositions of that and, health. And we've had a couple, I think the fecal transplant was one. I think the fecal transplant stood out to me because one that was interesting. What do you think, Aaron?
Well, yeah, being a microbiologist, the fecal transplant thing always is a standout. Some of the internet trends were interesting. Always just have so much fun. Even like some of the outtakes, we end up singing songs and things, and so they've all been amazing. Well, some have been a little rough, but they've all been good.
And without first, for the listeners, we'll have the link to your website and the podcast so they can check it out if they haven't already. Um, but also just, and I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this, but I'm curious, Stephanie, about that story. Was she mad at him, or was this just something, as far as you know, or this just what was the why? Why?
This was No, this was her, um, one of her acts of love and, maybe one of her signs of compassion and care, which was adding that extra ingredient, to really solidify, that she, you know I guess the closest thing I guess you can put in there is, how people use the slang, like, with food is really good, it's like, "Oh, you really put your foot in that food," like, I don't know if it's kind of, like, along those same lines. Aaron is looking at me. Was perfectly happy in educating other people on how to do the same, and so you can tell that this was something that, was common in their household, and we completely support, but again, as scientists, we wanted to, have our specific spin on health risks.
Was thinking of the British Bake Off show about how they're always like, "Oh, I didn't add enough yeast. The bread's not rising. There's not enough time."
Which is actually, on a side thing, it is a very nice show, the British Bake Off. I just watched the latest season, and it's very. They're always so nice. I love that about the British with each other, and I think at the end they don't win money. I think it's just like a plate or something.
I
I
think,
think
yeah, they get their friends together. There's like a picnic or something. But
so different.
as a
Yeah,
microbiology community, we're like that. We help each
hmm
other.
yeah, we do. Yes. So alongside the podcast, you also created. There's it's called Little Lab Learners ABCs of Laboratory Medicine. So what inspired you to take on a children's book focus on laboratory medicine?
Yeah, so the Little Lab Learners series really came out of the inspiration of us wanting to give early learners the opportunity to have a powerful realization of who we are and to discover laboratory medicine. There is a gap when you talk about STEM education, and there's a lot of prevalence of STEM education out there, but there is a gap of STEM education related to lab medicine, and we wanted to do something that would fill that gap. So we wanted to create a series, Little Lab Learners, that would introduce laboratory medicine concepts early to early learners in a way that was both scientifically accurate, but also joyful and playful so kids could understand it, but they could also see themselves. I mean, awareness is great, but also relating that awareness back to a career and relating that awareness back to an actual profession, and being able to see yourself in that profession is more powerful. And so through the book, children will be able to transform themselves into little lab learners and see lab professionals, scientists, helpers, problem solvers. And we hope to really plant that seed early on of curiosity, like I said, awareness. And so when they get to school, unlike the rest of us who probably stumbled into this profession, this is something that they'll be cognizant of and aware of.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the same thing. It was something that I stumbled into, but yeah, to give kids that possibility, and even to introduce them to topics that they might not be aware of, like more of microbiology and laboratory safety, and even one of our letters, the letter Z is zone of inhibition, and it's a fun wizard where you see like the zone on a Kirby Bowers. to introduce concepts to kids. And the really the only book I had been given, one of my former mentors, Carlene Van Sicklen, when I went to do outreach with some kids, she had a little tiny kids book from 1996 that was like Jenna goes and gets her blood drawn. And it was very tiny, had a couple little graphics, but really to get into what we did as a profession. And with the book series, it's a fun way for them to kind of interact, ask questions about the laboratory. And Stephanie did stress that it's a series, so I'm excited that the next book in the series will be microbiology. So, ooh, I'm excited.
Looking forward to that as well. Okay. And it is that's so great, and as I said, that the young readers, they can start seeing the lab as a career choice and learning about it, and that is great. I think always growing up, right, thinking it's always so linear that people always think, either nurse, doctor, and then the lab is always something that comes out later in the university, or they find out maybe they knew someone, and that's always very classic case how a lot of people end up doing this and becoming medical lab scientists. Okay, so then it's a series, and then the ABCs of lab medicine is the first book of the series.
That's the initial book of the series, yeah. So we introduce you to laboratory medicine, and then we've already got concepts for individual sections in the laboratory, and some other fun things that'll accompany the book, workbooks and stickers and flashcards and all of those things. So the book is, like we said, it uses an A to Z format. So A is for antibodies, Z is for zone of inhibition. And so we hope that the book is instrumental to help parents as they are introducing this book to their children. It's also introducing laboratory concepts and the laboratory career. It's colorful, it's engaging. Um, we just got our first book review, and I was trying to pull it up so I can read one of the lines it exactly said, but it said, "I adore books that explore vocabulary and spark discussion." And so that's exactly the reaction that we were looking for. We were looking for something that was gonna be both colorful, engaging, kid-friendly, but intentional. Intentional in sparking those questions and intentional at making kids really wonder about the laboratory of medicine, but not be overwhelmed.
Okay, all right. And then so because from what I've seen, is it in pre-order mode, or is it already out there? Has it already been released? You said you had a review.
So we are recording this on January 22nd, and so pre-sales started January 1st. And so if you go to our website, labcares.org, you can pre-order the book for sale, and then those orders will ship effective February 2nd.
Okay. So by now, anything else when it comes to any early reactions or interest that you have received so far? You already mentioned the review, but anything else?
So I have had the chance to share the book with some of my coworkers and some of my fellow lab professionals, and it's that excitement of, oh, I wish I had this. Oh, when can I purchase a copy so I can read it to my kids? Um, and then even a couple people talking about potentially having like a little book kind of get together with lab professionals where they can get their kids together and do like a small reading. So it has been exciting. It's something I wish I had when I was a kid because I my favorite part was the lab, and I didn't realize it was a whole career that I could just do the lab part of the class and help people. I think if I would have seen all those initial concepts when I was a kid, that would have helped. Yeah, some of my coworkers have really loved it. My sister's actually a elementary school librarian, so it showed her the book, and she was pretty excited, and she wanted to show it to some of her coworkers and fellow librarians. It's been got a lot of good reaction.
Yeah, I think the most favorable reaction for me has been how many people outside of the lab have been kind of latching onto it. So educators, friends of ours who have children who were already kind of cognizant of what we did because, they may be, around you or hear or see awards that you might get, but to just really be able to dive into a book that really does that science and storytelling and be able to share that with their children has been a different level of advocacy for us. So it's been exciting.
Perfect. And before we kind of close the loop on that, just to kind of make sure you have already mentioned anything else that you can talk about, what readers can expect when it comes to when they have the book, and you already talk about some of the concepts, anything else?
I mean, I think lab medicine touches every patient, everybody's life. Everybody has gotten their lab drawn at some point in some time. And so we have touched so many more patients than, people may even realize. And so I don't think ad- advocacy sometimes, it's changed my vision of advocacy. Sometimes I'm thinking it's standing on top of a podium and shouting to the world, like, this is who I am, and I'm not behind the scenes. But really, sometimes advocacy is about mentoring and educating and telling your story, even if that's reading a book to a child and really sharing who you are. It's given me um, a bit of, I don't know, I'm gonna get too sentimental, Aaron, but, for my kids, I think a lot about legacy. And so if I'm not here, I'll have some tangible product that they can look at and see my name on it and, know from our website who Aaron was in my life and who Melody was in my life when they scroll down on our website and they see what we created. And so at this point, it's less about, being in front and more about what can I leave behind? What impact are you leaving for those individuals who you interacted with, So
I do like that. For me, it's also just adding more access to more possibilities. I always like to feel like in my career that I have options to and see myself or believe I can be anything. So to be able to give that to kids, because education is a huge part of my life and helping students, and so getting to help students find their path early, it's exciting.
And and speaking of advocacy, as kind of some final thoughts, that to leave the listeners with, what can you tell them about, like lab professionals when they're thinking about, and we have already mentioned some things here, but when they're thinking about advocacy, education, or telling the lab story, what final thoughts can you tell the listeners about that?
would say use your passion as your advocacy tool. It doesn't have to be huge. The illustrator of our book is a lab professional. And so he's using his passion for art and illustrating as an advocacy tool. And so when I was doing elaborate topics, I interviewed a wonderful woman who was from ACLS and she actually did fashion and she wove laboratory themes into her fashion. And so she had, instead of the typical picture of Trichomonas, it was like a beautiful model that had like this like Trichomonas tail. And she had, drawn that out and put it on purses. And so I thought that was very interesting. But I would say use what is native to you. If you love public speaking, then obviously you can speak at conferences, and if you love research and writing and doing articles, you can obviously do blogs. But if you love graphic design, you can make beautiful art that like the one is behind Aaron right now. So use what is native to you to advocate for other people and tell a story.
So the fashion line, Hannah Yang at Cleveland Clinic has a big passion for lab art. So she wanted to make like a Proteus dress and with the waves and everything. So yeah, I second that. You want to take your passion. Try not to compare yourself to other people. There's only one you, and you have amazing things to offer. Take those passions and don't be afraid to share them with people. Even if they're not related to the laboratory, surprisingly, the lab intersects everything, and your unique lens can be leading the profession or just you to a whole new world. Enjoy the ride too.
That is great, and yeah, that made me think of what's her name, Sophia, that she co-hosts the Off the Bench podcast from ASCLS.
That's what it is. Yeah.
That's right. She sent me some stickers, and yeah, I think at some point in time she was, I don't know if she did, but like planning on going with that like full time and stepping out of the lab and do that. So yeah, we all have so many different talents, and as you said, don't find what you're more comfortable with and go with that and don't compare yourself to others. That's not some we all have our different things, and even in this space like the podcast, maybe someone will launch something and will have more reach than you, with more listeners. So you're doing what you want, and it's find what you like. And I see some people on TikTok, and they just talk a little bit about, like see like blood bank or chemistry, and they have 20,000 followers already, and just so it's find your lane and go in, and also if you want to step out of your comfort zone too, and do that too. So it's just, but always, making sure that what you're doing and putting out there, it's responsible and accurate information. That's very important. Okay, so as I said, I'll put some links on the show notes, but for listeners to want to learn more, and you kind of mentioned already, but just in case, so where can they find Little Lab learners? And also, what's the best place to listen to the Superstat podcast?
So we would love if you would take a journey to Lab Cares, so LABCARES.org. That is our website. There's a beautiful little cartoon picture of me and Erin with our lab shirts on. Look at our superstat hoodies. And so you'll be able to keep up with what we are doing lately and pre-order the book, either hardback, softback, or ebook, and soon to be audiobook featuring Aaron's voice. And Superstat is available on YouTube and all major podcast platforms. So we'd love for you to share with us updates, join our conversations, look at our resources, be our friend on social media. I'm Stephanie Whitehead on most of my social medias. I know Aaron is Aaron Odegard on his, and Melody Bourgeois Nelson. And so we just want to stay linked in and engaged and connected with the profession. So, connect with us.
And I think I definitely see you around, and even before the podcast, I remember seeing both of you on socials, and now I see the Superstat podcast doing posts and like in LinkedIn and other socials. So yeah, okay. So there you have it, listeners. So check out the podcast and check out the website. The links are in the show notes for you. Okay. So I always like to end the episodes, on a light note, and it's always I ask a fun question, and it's always fun hearing the answers. Today we have a modified version of it. Um, for those of you that are listening, I always like to ask listeners what is their favorite bug. So today I have expanded it for just to make sure what is your favorite lab concept. Could be anything from a bug if you want to go with that answer. I don't know, Aaron.
I do.
There, yeah, okay, perfect. And then a test or even a moment in the lab that really stuck to you. And that also expands to sometimes something that maybe is not your favorite thing, also, because I had the least favorite bug answer too. So it can be either way. So I'm gonna start with you, Stephanie, and then move on to Aaron. So Stephanie, what is your favorite lab concept?
My favorite lab concept, I'm a blood banker at heart, and so, my favorite lab concept would be antibody screens. Um, like I said, I started out my career in blood bank. It was the multitasking, the fast pace. It just helped the shift go by better, and, it's very direct. It's very black or white, which is pretty much what my personality is. My favorite lab moment, as soon as you said that, what popped in my head was a time where I went to our grossing room, our AP section, and I was doing a tour for other people. And we were walking through, and I'm like, yeah, this is the lab. And I'm, my normal bubbly self, like, yeah, here's our PAs and they're grossing. And I saw an arm on the grossing station, and an arm the coloration was just like a mannequin. And it was probably like from like here down, right? And I was like, oh, they must be doing training, right? Because it looked prosthetic. And so the PAs are looking at me with this, like, confused look, and I'm like, "Yeah, they're actually in the middle of training, and so you can see here's an arm," and I'm, like, up close to it by now, and they were like, "Yeah, we're not training. That's a real arm." And I, like, took the hugest step back. I was like, "I work here, I promise. I have." But yeah,
Wow.
that's my favorite moment, and, blood bank is my favorite section.
Perfect. Yeah, I do have to say I do love blood bank too, and yeah, that'll be my favorite, my second subject. If in a world where there's no micro, yeah, I will be a blood banker. I definitely enjoy not only the mystery, I guess, and it's the challenge. Maybe that's why you like people that are microbiology or blood bankers. It's really like a little on the intense side, and there's like that little thing where you have to make sure that you're right, you're on top of it, and I don't know. It's like a good challenge, and it's busy work and mysterious, and I definitely love it too. Okay, so Aaron, what is your I guess what's your favorite lab concept?
I do my favorite bug.
Yes, yes.
Okay, awesome. Um, so my favorite bug is Chromobacteria violaceum. Mixed students learn all the time. You don't see it too often, but I love that purple color that you see, and people get real excited when I think the last one we had was surprisingly in a blood culture because they're usually like superficial leg wounds and stuff. But to see that cool purple color is always a ton of fun, and I love getting to show that to students. And I put that in like a microbiology color crown box that they get to color during lab week to draw stuff. And my probably one of my least favorite specimens. You were talking about the leg, and I thought about one of my mentors. She's good with everything, but like had a toe come into the lab. She's like, if it has little bits of hair on it, she's like, I just can't do it. So I know it's a little can be a little odd some of the stuff we get sometimes. And least favorite thing to process is probably ovum parasite. Some of those containers can be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. One, yeah, working with stool has its challenges, and sometimes, especially if you get that exploding one, it's, it's definitely not fun. But yeah, I don't know if when you went through your programs, but when I went through mine, they had us during our clinicals. One of the things was to they took us to the OR, and we had got to observe like an open heart surgery. So that was quite the experience.
That's cool. I got to go for like a stomach biopsies where for Helicobacter pylori, and they had me like holding the specimen tubes under my arms, trying to keep them warm to get back to the lab. But yeah, it's cool when you get to go to the OR and see some stuff or an arm, Stephanie.
Okay, well, as we kind of come to an end, do you have anything else to add to the audience? Any closing thoughts?
In closing, I would just say, every lab person matters. Your effort matters. Your effort is visible. And we'd love to connect with you. So don't be quiet. Be consistent with your impact. Be proud of what you do. Always be proud of the life that you touch and every diagnosis that you make and every patient that you benefit. And we'd love to partner with you in telling those stories, either through Lewis's podcast or our podcast or in another way. So connect with us, reach out to us, and let's keep being loud.
Say, don't let anyone tell you you can't do something. Little steps lead to a big journey, and so you never know where the world will take you.
Yeah, so true. I think sometimes, those, even when you encounter also those moments, yeah, that maybe people say no, they're kind of like a fuel to push yourself more. I think that if everything had gone smoothly in my career, I wouldn't be here today. I think that's always like that. You use that as a fuel, and you want to learn, and you want to grow, and you want to do things. So I love that. Definitely don't let people tell you no. Okay, well, it has been great having you both here. Definitely at some point in time, if you have a topic that you want to discuss, and whether you have the next book in the series, you're more than welcome. And unfortunately, your other co-host couldn't be here today. But of course, the door is open. And as I said, Aaron, we have to get you here and talk micro one day. But it has been wonderful. So Stephanie and Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time to be Let's Talk Micro.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Stephanie and Aaron. It's always great chatting with fellow medical lab scientists. And don't worry, Aaron is a microbiologist as well. So he will be coming on to Let's Talk Micro at some point in time to talk microbiology. So we're working on an episode, so stay tuned. And I love this initiative about getting young readers to learn about the lab. So shout out to the whole team of Little Lab Learners and SuperStat. You're doing such a great job. Okay, so as always, you can find Let's Talk Micro on any podcast platform. You go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Good Pods. You can find us there. So please subscribe to the podcast, download episodes, and if the app allows you to do so, please go ahead and leave a review. Thank you so much for the support. And you can also find us on socials. If you go to Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Blue Sky Social, you can find us there as Let's Talk Micro, on X as Let's Talk Micro 1, LinkedIn as Luis Plaza. There is an email address, which is letstalkmicro@outlook.com. And there's the website, letstalkmicro.com, which has content about episodes. It has content about study resources, licensing information, and more. So please subscribe to it as well. Bottom line, if you have any feedback, any topic suggestions, you can always send those to, via the website, via email, social media. They are always welcome and appreciated. And if you want to support us in any way, you can do so via Venmo or via Buy Me a Coffee, KOFI, both links available on the show notes. And as you know, my friends, learning about antibiotics can be difficult. So if you want to learn more about antibiotics, please check out www.learnantibiotics.com and the Learn Antibiotics book available on Amazon. These resources include cheat sheets, practice tests, games, and more, and they are being used by thousands of people worldwide and may be helpful for you or your colleagues. And as always, these are some great resources from Dr. Timothy Gauthier, a very passionate pharmacist. And the Let's Talk Micro podcast is supported by the American Society for Microbiology. To learn more about microbes, visit asm.org. And that, my dear audience, is the end of this episode. I hope you enjoy learning about the SuperStat Podcast and learning about the Little Lab Learners. Stay tuned. They're planning on doing more books, one about microbiology and so on. So great job, everyone. Shout out once again to the SuperStat team and the Little Lab Learners team. So stay tuned. As always, great things coming your way. I am so grateful for your support. So please continue bringing that passion to what you do. It's so important. You do such great work. So, as always, stay motivated, stay safe, and of course, continue talking micro. Until the next time. Bye.